Okay, we have 7 present, and we do have a quorum. First bill that we're going to hear is HB 2432. The patron is Delegate LaRocque. Delegate LaRocque, you're on board, sir.
Well, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thank you for hearing this bill today. I would like to start out by referencing the Durant bill, which I understand is the expectation is that will be combined with
Yes, sir.
2432. Delegate Durant has been very, very helpful and has been closely involved in the effort to shape the bill that I'm presenting, and I just wanted to let her know and the community know that we appreciate that help. Mr. Chairman, House Bill 2432, what it addresses is what I'll start with. First is the need for schools to notify parents if a student asserts a gender different from his or her biological sex. Number 2, we must prevent school counselors from withholding information, and encouraging minors to withhold information about a child's gender from their parents. Third and lastly, we absolutely must clarify that raising a child according to his or her biological sex, including decisions about a child's mental and physical health, may not be construed as abuse. I'll introduce Michelle Blair shortly. Her journey is quite extraordinary. She will tell us how the lack of these controls led her granddaughter, Sage, to go through a horrible set of experiences. There are so many others like Sage, and we owe it to them to fix the law and to protect them. We will hear from expert testimony supporting the need for these protections to be put in place. Without these protections, children like Sage and Michelle Sage will be scooped up by predators because keeping parents in the dark leaves the door wide open to whoever may use the cloak of secrecy to prey on children. As we hear testimony, I hope you will see that Sage's law is an anti-trafficking bill because it ensures parents are not kept in the dark about their children. And with that, and in the interest of time, Mr. Chair, I hope that you would hear testimony from Michelle Blair, Sage's mom. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Delegate LaRocque, patron? Delegate Subramanian.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. How would this bill account for situations where disclosing the child's gender identity unilaterally may make the child unsafe? So if the parent, let's say, parents disapprove to a point where the child fears that there may be, consequences, and they're afraid to tell their parents, how would this address that concern?
Mr. Chairman, I would say to the delegate, if the chairman would allow, I think the testimony from experts will address that question, and it might be better to revisit that if the question is still lingering.
Is that acceptable to you, sir?
Okay.
Delegate?
Yes.
Thank you.
Very good. Okay, testimony. I believe first on deck is Michelle Blair. Ms. Blair, you're welcome.
Good morning. I am Sage's mother, better known as Nana. I adopted Sage after my son died when she was still a baby. She's been through 6 foster homes by then, but we loved her, and she blossomed into a joyful, lively girl who made music and art. Puberty began and COVID hit, and she was treated for depression and anxiety, at times very severe. Her teachers shared any concerns with me so her treatment could be adapted. The transparency ended in August of 2021 when Sage started high school. She started a public high school, and she told me that all the girls there were bi, trans, lesbian, emo, and she wanted to wear boys' clothes and be emo. Because I saw it as just a phase, it was fine with me. But at school, she told them something different. She was now a boy named Brooke Draco with male pronouns. Sage asked the school not to tell me, and they did not tell me, even though I informed them of her mental health history and medication. If I had known, this would be a much different story. She was terribly bullied. No one told me, but boys followed her, touched her, threatened violence and rape. Something happened in the boys' bathroom, but for 2 days, the school told me nothing. They kept meeting with Sage alone, and she became so distraught, they called me to pick her up. That evening, I found a hall pass labeled Draco, and Sage told me she was identifying as a boy, and that her counselor said she could use the boys' bathroom. She'd been jacked up against the wall by a group of boys. She was crying, terrified. I said, just stay home, we'll figure it out. That was my last conversation with Sage for 5 months. The night she ran, she thought to a young friend she'd met online. She left a note saying she was scared of what would happen if she stayed. The sheriff, FBI, search dogs were called in. I dropped to my knees in prayer. 9 days later, the FBI found her in Baltimore. My baby had been lured online, sex trafficked by DC, then Maryland. She was locked in a room, drugged, gang raped, and brutalized by countless men. It was night. The FBI told us to pick her up in Maryland the next morning. We packed our cars with blankets and stuffed animals and arrived by 8 a.m. But we were told we couldn't see her and were summoned before Judge Robert Kershaw late that afternoon. They didn't even tell Sage that we came for her. We finally entered the courtroom, and Sage appears on a huge Zoom screen from a prison cell. She looks tiny and broken, and I cry out, "I love you, Sage." Sage responds, "I love you too, Nana." But attorney Anissa Khan rebukes us. She is a he, and his name is Draco, not Sage. We were floored. What? Khan accuses us of emotional and physical abuse, that we are misgendering her, even though we just learned she claims to be trans and we're willing to use any name and pronouns to bring her home. My husband was so tearful he kept forgetting the new pronouns, so the judge had the bailiff remove him from the courtroom. I was pleading for my child to be returned and treated for her unspeakable trauma. Judge Kershaw told me if I used the word trauma again, he would throw me out too. For over 2 months, he withheld custody. He housed Sage in a male quarters of a children's home. Sage told me she was the only girl and repeatedly assaulted. She was given street drugs by the other kids, and Khan told her she didn't care. She just wanted to win the case and all the way to Supreme Court if necessary. Khan tried to prove abuse, but we were eventually cleared by both states of all charges. Sage later told me Khan had told her to lie, that we hit her. Khan even had Sage's school counselors testify against us, though they barely knew Sage, and they didn't know us at all. Khan told my precious child I didn't want her anymore. I found out Sage never received any of the letters I sent her. Sage ran from the children's home and disappeared for months. They told me she might already be gone forever, but I couldn't give up, and I finally found a tip on her social media that led the marshals to her in Texas. She had been drugged, raped, beaten, and exploited. This time I was able to be with her for the traumatic rape exam and to bring her home. Back in Virginia, she entered the mental health facility that Judge Kershaw had ordered, as it would affirm her as a male. The therapist began pressuring her to have her healthy breasts removed. Sage was too scared to protest, but she asked me to secretly buy her girls' clothes because she wanted to be a girl, but keep them in the car. It took a kind lawyer, Josh Hetzler, to secure her discharge. After almost a year, Sage was finally home, safe, alive. Sage is receiving professional trauma care. The first trafficker has already been convicted. Sage has nightmares, panic attacks, rape-related medical issues, but there's hope. I told her she's not broken, she's just scarred. And part of that hope is that in courageously sharing her story, others will be saved. Sage said she doesn't know who she was back then. She wasn't a boy. She just wanted to have friends. But her school The judge, the attorney, and the doctor were all blinded by their ideology. The consequences for Sage were unspeakable. Please don't let ideology harm another child. Let parents do our jobs. We know our children best, and we love them a million times more. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Delegate LaRock, I believe you have some expert witnesses that are on the virtual queue. Is that correct, sir?
We do, I believe, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate your accommodating them. They're professionals from other
Okay.
states who are subject matter experts on this, who have careers and days
Very good.
at work today. So if you can accommodate them, I would appreciate that.
Okay. First, virtual, Aaron Friday. Aaron, are you with us?
I am, thank you.
And Ms. Friday, if you can't hold your comments, okay, we are kind of moving along here. Go ahead, please.
I'm an attorney and a lifelong Democrat who voted for same-sex marriage. I'm co-lead of Our Duty, an international group of parents of various political backgrounds. My daughter was convinced that she was a trans boy for close to 2 years. She did not come by this belief organically. She came by it by her school's sex ed course that told her that she could be born in the wrong body. Her public school changed her name and pronoun without my consent. When I expressed my anger, I was told that school was her safe place. By extension, apparently I was unsafe. CPS and the police showed up at my home a few days later. As soon as my child announced her trans identity, her mental health plummeted. She barely got out of bed. She was told that all of her pain would disappear if she transitioned. She was enticed by the internet glitter families to run away, emancipate, and cruelly to call me by my birth name. I was no longer mom, but enemy number one. I confiscated her phone and computer. I saw that there were strangers, trans-identified people, telling her to find a sugar daddy by posting provocative pictures. It became clear to me that the descriptor FTM, female to male, on her Instagram account was a siren for pedophiles. She was sent the most vulgar porn. She was only 13. Sage's story could have been my daughter's. She was told that life would be great if she would just get away from her hateful transphobic mother. Schools should never keep secrets from parents. Parents don't disappear on weekends, after 3 p.m., over Christmas and spring breaks, or over summers. And we certainly don't disappear when our children are struggling. Please support HB 2432.
Thank you, ma'am. Next, we have Dr. Julia Mason. Yes, I'm sorry. Delegate McGuire has a question for you, ma'am. Delegate McGuire, you're so called. Go.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would ask Aaron, in your experience, how widespread do you think this problem of parent notification is? Do you think it's a right or left-wing issue, or is it just really a political one?
I'm a Democrat of 37 years. It is not a political issue. It shouldn't be a political issue, and it is extremely widespread. In fact, teachers are taught by their Teachers Association to keep secrets from parents, which triangulates the relationship and confuses children. Children now think that their parents are hateful because teachers are telling them that.
Thank you.
Follow-up question?
Yes, go ahead.
A follow-up question is, do you see a link between secrecy from parents and sex trafficking?
Absolutely. Like I said, when I looked at my daughter's phone, it was clear that she was being groomed by older adults to both run away and to send provocative pictures. And yes, it is a pipeline to sex trafficking. These girls are extremely vulnerable, and the men know this.
Thank you. Delegate McGuire, answer your question.
Yes, thank you.
All right, Dr. Julia Mason. Dr. Mason, if you can hold your comments around 1 minute, we'd appreciate it.
Sure. Hi, good morning. I'm Julia Mason. I'm a pediatrician for over 25 years. I'm a founding member and board member of the Society for Evidence-Based Gender Medicine, or SEGM, and I'm speaking in support of this bill because social transition, although it is not a medical procedure, is a powerful, has a powerful effect on a child. and should not be undertaken without the knowledge and participation of the parents. I like this bill because it's not trying to come between a doctor and their patient, and it's not trying to criminalize medical care. But I do think that parents should be involved with their child's care, and that if there's a concern that parents are abusive, teachers already have an obligation to report such concerns to Child Protective Services.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for your testimony. Dr. McGuire has a question for you, ma'am.
Yes, Dr. Mason, I'd like to ask, what do you think is the effect on kids of concealing gender transition from their parents? Does it help protect children like activists say, or would it potentially harm kids to have their parents involved?
I think that concealing a gender transition from the parents is not in the best interest of the child. It sets up the parents as the enemy, and the online spaces where kids congregate already, set up the parents as an enemy. This is a normal stance of adolescence, opposition to parents, and we don't need anything to enhance that. When it comes to serious decisions like whether or not to undergo a path that will lead to sterilization, the adults who care most about that person, which are the students' parents, need to be involved.
Answer your question, sir. Yep. Delegate McGuire.
Follow-up question, I'd say, is there enough medical evidence to provide grounds for schools unilaterally deciding to affirm gender transition in schools?
I do not believe there's enough medical evidence to support this. In fact, a recent publication from the University of Washington in Seattle showed that when kids are socially transitioned, 98% of them remain in their cross-sex gender identity 5 years later, whereas in the past, when the conservative treatment was called watchful waiting, where you didn't tell the kid they couldn't wear what they wanted, but you also didn't change their name and pronouns, 2/3 to 90% of kids would desist as they moved into adolescence.
Answer your question.
So social transition concretizes what could have been a transient identity.
Thank you, Dr. Mason. Next, we have Dr. Aaron Brewer. Dr. Brewer, if you could be brief, please, we'd appreciate it. We'll call you at 1 minute, okay?
Thank you so much for the opportunity to testify. I'm a former trans kid. I was insistent and persistent and insistent that I was a boy when I started first grade after a brutal sexual assault. If I had been affirmed by my teachers, it would have allowed me to completely dissociate from myself as a girl and create a new persona who could pretend that the horrible trauma that triggered my gender dysphoria hadn't happened to me. It would have reinforced the mistaken belief that it caused me to develop gender dysphoria, that it was too dangerous to be a girl. Instead of encouraging my confusion and hiding it from my mother, the school contacted my mother, got permission for me to be assessed by the school psychologist, and they came up with a comprehensive program to help me resolve my gender dysphoria. I'm incredibly grateful to that school psychologist and to my teachers for doing the right thing, for formulating a program to help me to understand that I was not inherently flawed and that I was not born in the wrong body. I 100% support this legislation, and it's important to help protect children from these difficult feelings and not to alienate them from their parents. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. You have a question from Delegate McGuire. You have the floor, sir.
Yes, Dr. Brewer, in your experience working with families, have there been times when children are encouraged to believe their families are not safe and to withhold information from them?
Most definitely. It's incredibly discouraging to find out that children are actively being taught that their parents aren't safe, that their teachers are the only safe person in their lives, and that disrupts the important bond that parents have with their children. In fact, if a teacher believes that an environment isn't safe for a child, it's their obligation to report it to the Child Protective Services. And so they can't have it both ways. They can't say that a child isn't safe to tell their parents about their gender confusion, but then not report it. I feel like this is
Delegate McGuire has a follow-up. Delegate
Yes.
McGuire.
Okay, go ahead.
Yes, Dr. Brewer, would SAGE's law protect children or would it put kids in danger?
It would most definitely protect children, and I am incredibly hopeful that it will pass. Thank
Delegate
you.
McGuire? Okay. Next, we have Abel Garcia. Abel, please keep your comments brief if you may. We'll give you 1 minute. Go, please.
Thank you. My name is Abel Garcia. I'm a male D transitioner. I transitioned at the age of 19 as a legal adult. Had I had the opportunity to transition as a minor, and I transitioned to the state of California, I know they would have definitely gone against my parents' back. Now that I am much older and I have detransitioned, I have learned from my parents and my grandparents that they had been very saddened by what had happened to me. And I am very aware that had it been as a minor in California, they would have had no way to stop anything from the school. I know there are many detransitioners who transitioned as children in the state of California and other states, and their lives have been destroyed just like mine. I'm here to support this bill.
Thank you. Delegate McGuire, you have a question for the witness. Go ahead.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Abel, do you feel that adults in your life played the role they should have been in protecting you and giving you full understanding of what was involved in transition as a child?
I was not informed of anything properly when I wanted to transition, and those around me who were in support of my transition told me my family were enemy number one, unfortunately.
Answer your question, Delegate McGuire. You have a follow-up? You have the floor.
Abel, looking back, what do you wish the adults around you had said or done differently when you were a child?
I wish they would have been a bit more understanding of what I was trying to do, and I wish the adults had been more against what I was doing.
Answer your question, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Next, we have Mary McAllister, Esquire. Ms. McAllister, if you will keep your comments brief, please, we'll give you 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm an attorney here in Virginia, in Amherst County, Virginia. I work for the Child and Parental Rights Campaign. We're a national pro bono law firm. We represent parents on these issues all over the country. And in a response to Delegate McGuire's question, this is a rampant problem all over the country. We get calls daily from parents all over the country, including in Virginia, who similarly to Sage's mom, similarly to what Aaron Friday said, are just devastated because they were never told. They were kept in the dark, and their children have now gone down a path that they were not able to support them on. This is a critically important bill that will give parents, it simply gives parents the information they need to then walk with their child through this process and avoid this wedge being driven between the parents and the children. And so we wholeheartedly support this.
Thank you.
And
Delegate
as a
McGuire,
lawyer
you have
in
a question?
Commonwealth,
Yeah, so I think Mary answered part of it. I was going to ask you how widespread are stories like Sage's in Virginia, but I think you said it was widespread. And then the next question is, how would Sage's law protect children and families in your opinion?
it would give the information to parents that they need to be fully informed of what's going on with their child, and also to fully inform the school. Because if they have the information, the school, as in Sage's case, the school did not have the whole story of Sage's background and her mental health issues. And that's a very critical thing. So the parents need to be involved so they can work together with the schools, partner with the schools in helping the child through this experience.
Thank you, ma'am. Delegate Durant, you have a comment or question? You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A question for Dr. Mason. Are there studies that show what the risk of suicide is, if it lessened, increased? Where does it stand when it comes to gender affirmation? Are kids more likely to commit suicide if they're not affirmed? Can you speak to that?
Right. This is a common claim, but there's no evidence that shows that affirmation lowers the risk of suicide. The claim is based on surveys of people who describe their suicidal thoughts, but when you look at the actual data, Michael Biggs is a researcher in England, and he looked at data of patients of the Tavistock Gender Clinic compared to their wait list, and they had the same rate of suicide, which was very low. Thankfully, the rate of suicide, completed suicide in all of these children is very low. It's higher than the general population, but it's equivalent to kids with other diagnoses, such as major depression, anxiety, obsessive compulsive disorder.
Thank you, ma'am. Delegate
question?
Durant?
Follow-up question, Mr.
Yeah,
Chair?
yes, you have the floor, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Also for Dr. Mason, you mentioned citing some data from, I think it was England. So there's some review that's been happening internationally. Is that correct? And if so, are we doing that sort of same review here in the U.S.?
Right. We are not undertaking systematic reviews of the evidence, such as has been done in Sweden and Finland and England. In those countries, possibly because they have national healthcare systems and a fiduciary responsibility for evidence-based care, those countries have undertaken systematic reviews of the evidence and have decided that pediatric medical gender transition is not supported by the evidence.
Does that answer your question, Delegate Durant?
Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you for the testimony, folks. Sorry to have pushed you on time factors here, but at this point, Delegate LaRocque, if I may, I would like to go back and for the audience that's here, the live and in-person people, as I call them, we'll ask those who want to speak in favor to come up first, and please line up. And if the speaker before you has a comment that you like, just say, I support it, okay? Anyone wishing to speak in favor, please come forward, and we're going to limit you to 1 minute. Welcome, sir.
Mr. Chairman, Josh Hetzler, on behalf of the Family Foundation and the Founding Freedoms Law Center, our legal division, we were fortunate enough to help Michelle regain Sage, and what we saw through the process was egregious, and we believe that a legislative fix is necessary, and so we support the bill.
Thank you. Next, welcome to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Susan Musket, President of Pro Family Women, and we support HB 2432. This bill is important because parents will be brought into the process when a student first identifies as the opposite sex at school. And this is important not only because parents have the right to direct the upbringing of their children, but because it is a parent who has the fullest knowledge of a child's mental and emotional history and needs. The presumption should always be that a parent has the best interests of their child at heart. We especially appreciate that the bill prohibits a school counselor from encouraging a minor child to withhold information regarding their sexual identity from their parents. A school should never pit a parent and a child against each other. Thank you very much.
Next.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. My name is Matt Sharp. I'm Senior Counsel with Alliance Defending Freedom. Our firm currently represents families in Virginia and across the country who have personally suffered because of government policies that deprive children of the right to deprive parents of the right to educate and raise their children consistent with their beliefs. Specifically, Alliance Defending Freedom is currently representing families with children in the Harrisonburg public school system here in Virginia, where under a school district policy, parents were being excluded from conversations about their child's mental health and gender identity, and teachers were forced to deceive parents about their children's struggles. HB 2432 would ensure that schools do not withhold information from parents about their children's mental and emotional health.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next. Again, we'll limit you to 1 minute, ma'am. Thank you. Go.
Right. I'm Susan Franz. I'm from Williamsburg, Virginia. I agree with everything that everybody has said. I support this bill. And here's the thing, people. When are we going to live in reality? Children cannot choose their gender. I cannot choose to say the sky is green when the sky is blue. Please, let's live in the world of reality. Let's give parental rights back to the parents and stop driving a wedge between them.
Thank you.
If children can't vote when they're 5 years old, then they can't choose their gender identity when they're 5 years old.
Thank you, ma'am. Again, welcome to you also.
Hi, my name is Shelley Arnoldi. I'm with Moms for Liberty Fairfax chapter. I'm also a mother of teenagers who have gone through public school since kindergarten, and this has directly affected my children and the circles of my children and my friends, and this I strongly support this bill.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, welcome to you, sir.
Thank you. My name is Chris Nestor. I live in Richmond, Virginia, and I speak for myself. I'm in favor of this because parental rights have to be preserved for the sake of the children. Sage's story says it better than I can.
Thank you, sir. Next, welcome, and please be brief.
Hi, yep. I'm Erin St. Germain. I drove down from Northern Virginia, Fairfax County, and I'm just here as a mom to say that we have our kids back. Like, we have them, and I also want to just let everyone know that we also want to protect trans kids. We want to protect all kids. So I support HB 2432.
Thank you. Next, please be brief. Again.
I'm Laura Hanford. I helped craft this bill, and I wrote Sage's story for the Federalist, which I would direct you to for more detail. Just a few threads on policy to pull out here. There were clear points of inflection of institutional failure, where the schools did exactly what the Northam policies and Fairfax schools, like where I live, did. The schools kept a secret from parents. The counselors testified against the parents in court, and the judge affirmed aggressively, and the results were catastrophic. So what we're asking you today is you can't fix what happened to Sage. The policies some of you voted for, I don't think you meant for this to happen, but they led directly to what happened to her. You can't fix it for Sage, you can fix it for other kids.
Thank you, ma'am.
So we're asking you to do that today. Thank you.
Next, again, please be brief.
Good morning, sir. I will be brief. I just wanted to say that I fully support this bill in the parental right. I just wanted to say that parents cannot effectively do their job if the faculty of the school withholds knowledge from the parents. The child is vulnerable and needs protection. Parents have responsibility for their children and have the right to know what their child is being taught or is struggling with. I just wanted to say the faculty of the school is given custody of the child by the parents, and the teacher is accountable to the parent. The teacher who is given temporary responsibility of the child does not have the right to undermine the parent's authority. Thank you.
Thank you. If you're in favor, please say so.
In favor. My name is Travis Waggerty. And this is personal bias, but I don't care. What gives you the right? We voted you in. You're talking about the parents' rights, the kids' rights, but you are taking their rights into your hands.
We're asking those in favor, are you opposed to this?
I'm in favor.
You're in favor. Oh, you're in favor of the bill. Okay.
But I will say this. What brings you to oppose it? Is it the fact that you are sitting here able to choose not to help parents, or is it the fact that you are sitting here able to oppose a certain law? This is about the children's and the parents' rights, not your right to oppose their rights.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone wishing to speak in opposition? Likewise, please line up. And again, we are going to give you 1 minute. And if you are repeating that I agree or disagree, we will cut testimony at that point, okay? You're up, sir. Welcome.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Chair and delegates, I'm Drew Newton with Side by Side, Richmond's LGBTQ Youth Center since 1991. And on behalf of our youth and organization, we oppose this bill. As you vote, please keep these statistics in mind. The Trevor Project reports that fewer than 1 in 3 transgender and non-binary youth found their home to be gender affirming. Among LGBTQ plus youth ages 13 to 24, 45% reported having seriously considered suicide, including more than half of transgender and non-binary youth. LGBTQ plus youth who report having at least one accepting adult, that being included a trusting educator, are 40% less likely to report a suicide attempt. When a student can be themselves in school, when they can form trusting relationships with their educators, and when they do not have to operate out of fear that their identity will be forcibly told to an unsupportive parent or guardian without their consent, they can succeed. Please keep these statistics in mind and oppose House Bill 2432. Thank you.
Mr. Chair?
If you have similar I'm sorry, Delegate Durrett,
Yeah,
you have the
Can
floor.
I ask a question with the testimony?
A question for the testimony.
So in this bill, in the suicide code, are you aware that there's a section that if the child is expressing the reason for their suicide ideation is directly connected to abuse or neglect in the home, then this does not require a parent to be as soon as practically notified, but instead they need to institute an investigation if there's abuse or neglect. Are you aware of that component?
I understand that, but we also are assuming then that there's been reported abuse in the home, and simply the student could be part of a home where they are not accepted and no abuse.
There is no assumption of it. They would be required to institute an investigation that a parent, there is suspected abuse or neglect, and that is the direct reason why this child is expressing this as suicide ideation, and instead a parent does not have to be notified. Are you aware of that component of this bill?
I would simply say that we oppose the bill. Thank you.
Answer your question, Doug Abdurrahman. Thank you. If you're in favor, do you have anything new to add? Tell us your name, who you are, please.
My name is Caitlin O'Brien.
Caitlin?
I am a transgender woman from Newport News, and I am asking you to oppose this bill. I am aware of the clause that would notify instead Child Protective Services, and that would have killed me as well. When I was 6, I was thrashed with a belt by an otherwise loving parent because of gender nonconformity. When I was 13 years old, a 19-year-old Eagle Scout saw me buying clothing from the store, molested me, and used my fear of being outed to silence me. If children cannot safely speak to an adult at home, they should be able to speak to one trained in child care at school. Today, I have been living happily for years as myself in spite of having to overcome trauma, but if I had been outed to parents or taken away from them by Child Protective Services, which is not parental rights, for trusting a school counselor, I would have literally not survived my childhood. I would not be speaking to you here today.
Thank you for your testimony.
The social isolation creates predation.
Thank you for your testimony.
Hi, my name is Bree. I am someone who lives in Richmond in the Jackson Ward neighborhood. I grew up in Fairfax County Public Schools, and starting at the age of 12, my sister was forcibly outed as a lesbian, and that was the first time I saw my mom threaten her with a knife because of her sexuality. Later, I would see my sister be choked up against the wall because all that was different, other than her straight A's, was that she wasn't straight. Since then, I have been beaten and battered, mentally and physically abused by my parents to the point that I ran away from home for safety. CPS was called for sure. The school encouraged me to go to my parents and seek support from them. CPS came, my parents lied, did not say that they abused me. I had no marks that they could use to prove that the abuse was real. And I ran away from home at 19, and I've been living in and out of cars, couch surfing to the point where I now fucking use this cane so I can get around. Not being able to be safe in a place of learning, not being able to reach out to any adult because the adults that were supposed to take care of me didn't, means that I have a freaking disability now. Do not vote yes to this bill.
Next, again, please be brief. Thank you, and welcome to you.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Anthony Bellotti. I'm here representing the Trans Radical Activist Network, specifically their legislative arm, of which I'm the founder of the Virginia chapter. I just want to start by saying I've been out for 10 years, meaning that I had came out at the age of 13. For many years, without the knowledge of my parents, I wanted to figure out my gender identity before I presented it to them. And I was lucky to be raised in a home where gender nonconformity was not punished. However, my trans identity was after I was forcibly outed for using the male bathroom, of which my school did not give me permission to, and I later went on to actually help write the model policies that I'm sure many of you all oppose in 2024 trans youth. And I just want to say that we know from many, many facets of research that actually CPS involvement can lead to a child later in life to homelessness, to incarceration, to sex trafficking, so to involve CPS where they don't need to be. Obviously, there are cases where they need to be there.
Thank you for your testimony.
Yeah.
Thank you. Next, again, please be brief if you can. Welcome.
Hello, I'm Riley Sarmento. I'm a trans woman. The first person I ever told when I came out was my mom. She was actually incredibly supportive of me, and I think it's kind of ridiculous that you want legislation to force children to tell, or to force teachers to tell parents something when it should be that child's own choice. They are people, like we are people, and like if we want to tell who we want to tell, like that's on us.
Okay, thank you. Next, if you agree with the previous speaker, say so, and let's move on, okay? Welcome to you.
That's fine.
My name is Apollo, and I agree with this previous speaker of it should be the children or the child's choice to be able to tell their parents, because I had a good relationship with my parents and I was able to come out and tell them, and I felt safe doing so. And I want every child to have that ability to choose when they feel the time is right. Thank you.
Thank you. Likewise, if you agree with the previous speaker, please state, and let's move on. Welcome.
Hi there. My name is Gabrielle. I'm a law student here at the University of Richmond. I agree with the previous speakers, and I oppose this bill. Kids are bullied in schools when you allow and enable transphobia and homophobia. Kids should have the room to find themselves and figure out their own identities on their own time. Children are not the property of their parents, and parental rights should not be valued over children's rights. Parents with trans kids are not experts on the trans experience, and kids will hide things from their parents when they think that their parents will respond with hate and even violence. This bill will enable abuse and violence towards children expressing a trans identity, which is why the sponsor took care to exclude that conduct as abuse. Supporting testimony hasn't said anything that shows this bill will eradicate sex trafficking, prevent sexual assault, or help kids feel like they belong and are accepted in their school. This bill is disgusting and hateful, and it will lead to the abuse and death of children and teens. Support queer and trans kids. Vote no. Thank you.
Thank you for it. Again, please be brief with your testimony. Thank you.
Good morning.
We have about 3 pages of virtual people out there, and we have about a half hour to finish.
Good morning. My name is Allie Woodworth, and I live in Henrico County, and I oppose this bill. I'm the daughter of a retired educator and the wife of a former educator, and I've seen firsthand how much teachers care for and seek to protect their students. No teacher wants to place any student in harm's way by outing them to parents who may not support them. Bills like these would force teachers to choose between following the law and doing what's right to protect students. I urge you to trust teachers and vote against this bill.
Thank you. If I may, at this point, because of the number that we have on virtual, I would ask all speakers that come forward to either say, yes, I'm for, or yes, I'm against. Okay, let's move on. Give us your name.
Mr. Chair, members of the subcommittee, my name is Wyatt Rolla on behalf of the ACLU. The ACLU opposes HB 1707 and HB 2432. Just to make a very brief point,
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, the members of this and the members of this subcommittee to consider the message it sends to transgender youth for this language to be inserted into a code section mandating parental notification if a student is at imminent risk of suicide. Not depression, not anxiety, not risk of self-harm, imminent risk of suicide. This bill is treating children identifying as a gender other than the one they were assigned at birth as commensurate with that child's death.
Thank you
Do
for
not
your
send that
testimony.
message to
Thank
Virginia's
you.
children.
Next, please tell us whether you're for or against, and your name.
Against this, obviously.
Thank you.
And you have to look at the fact that you are going to promote bullying doing this, making it so that the student is outed.
Thank
You
you.
are going to promote bullying. Don't do this.
Again, tell us whether you're for or against, and give us your name. Thank you.
My name is Jennifer Underwood from Midlothian, and I am very much against this bill.
Thank you, ma'am. Likewise, tell us whether you're for or against.
My name is Ashley Moore at the Legal Aid Justice Center, and we oppose this bill and just want to emphasize that information
Thank you.
going to unsupportive parents could cause harm at home and undermine trust relationships at school.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, for or against.
Shannon McKay, Executive Director of He, She, Ze, and We. We are against this bill, but I did take time off from work to come here today, so I feel like I also want to say that forced outing, not even when a student can go to their school counselor and speak in privacy about their own concern about their gender identity, immediately calling the parents is what the problem is.
Thank you.
You need to make a plan with the students about what feels comfortable and right to them and making sure that their safety is at the forefront of the conversation.
Thank you, ma'am. Next, are you for or against the bill?
My name is Jennifer Morris. I live in Ashland, Virginia, and I'm here to say I oppose this bill, and my parental rights matter as well. I want my children to have the ability to speak confidentially with their counselors at school.
Thank you, ma'am.
I oppose this bill.
Thank you. Next, are you in favor or opposed to the bill?
My name is Virginia Pannenbecker from Roanoke. I'm a parent and also as a community member. I did also take time off of work today, and you heard a lot from the supporting people, so I'd like you to listen
Thank
to
you.
some of the comments from the opposing side.
Are you opposed to the bill, ma'am?
I am opposed
Okay,
to this
thank
bill.
you.
Every LGBTQ plus person's journey is unique, and deciding to share parts of their identity with others should be in their control. Please oppose
Thank you,
this
ma'am.
bill and protect the safety and respect that LGBTQ+ youth
Thank you.
deserve.
Next, are you opposed to the bill? Please
Good
say
morning.
so.
I'm Kimberly Denmark. I'm a teacher in Richmond, Virginia, and I just want to say you need to trust the state license us. They allow us to care for children. Please trust our professional judgment.
Thank you. Next, are you opposed to the bill?
Hello, my name is Kylie Hines. I'm opposed to this bill. I'm also a macro social worker. These relationships between parents and their children, these conversations should be private and not initiated or interfered with by
Thank
school
you.
employees.
Next, are you opposed to the bill?
Molly Whitehorn with the Human Rights Campaign. We're strongly opposed.
Thank you. Next, final. Next.
Narissa Rahaman with Equality Virginia. Transgender youth are beautiful, they are perfect, and they deserve the safety to thrive
Thank you.
at school.
You're opposed to the bill? Yes, ma'am. Okay, let's go to the virtual world. To the virtual world, there are 3 pages of you here, so I will ask you whether you're in favor or opposed to the bill, and please state so, and then we'll move on to the next one. Testimony was going to be very limited here, okay? First, we have Stephanie Lindquist Aurora. Okay, we can't hear you, Stephanie. We can't hear you. Let me come back to you. Next, we have Mr. Scott Woodruff. Mr. Woodruff, are you opposed to the bill or in favor? Mr. Woodruff. Pardon me? He's not in, okay. Next, you have Ms. Yvonne Bunn. Okay.
Mr. Chair, I suspect that these people are in queue for Delegate McGuire's.
Okay,
bill.
they are, and we also have them in queue here. Okay, Ms. Erin Friday, are you for or against the bill? Aaron Brewer, for or against?
I am for the bill.
Thank you. Aaron Brewer, for
I
or
am
against?
for the bill. Thank you.
Dr. Julia Mason, for or against?
I am for the bill.
Mary McAllister, for or against? Laura Hanford, for or against? Okay. Abel Garcia, for or against?
For the bill.
Carrie Maghu, for or against? Next, Stephanie Lindquist Aurora, for or against? Next, we have Vic Nichols, for or against? Next, we have Alexis Nestor, for or against?
Parents Defending Education Action is for this bill.
Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Saint Germain, yes. Aaron, are you for or against? Thank you. Diana Howard, for or against?
We support the bill for parental rights.
Thank you. Ms. Heather Kime, for or against?
Really quick, I did just want to address some miscommunication or incorrect information. I did want to say that 91% of sexual assault is committed by cis men. So if you're worried about
Next, we have.
So if you were worried about that, you actually did let that one. So you would need to worry about.
For or against? Okay, next we have Kyra Tiller, for or against? And next we have Gayleen. Gayleen, are for or against?
The Virginia NAACP is strongly against this bill.
Okay, that concludes our virtual world. Delegate McGuire, you have a question?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to speak to the bill.
You have the floor, sir.
Just a reminder to everyone that January is Anti-Human Trafficking Month, and in many ways, SAGE's law is an anti-trafficking bill because it ensures parents are not kept in the dark about their child. Now, when you remove parents from a child's life, either by deceiving them about what their child is involved with or by taking the child away, you remove the greatest protection for a child's life. In SAGE's case, she was lured away twice by predators who took advantage of her parents, having been excluded from knowing what was going on with her. And so I'd like to thank Delegate Dave LaRock for carrying this bill, and I'm in full support.
Thank you. Delegate Subramaniam.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to go back to my first question because I don't think I'm convinced of the answer quite yet, but maybe the patron can help me. I'll start with the story and then I'll ask the question. What seems to happen more, because I have several real-life examples that I can provide, is a student, their parent finds out that of their transition and kicks them out of the house as soon as they find out. And then they have no place to go, and it leads to a lot of the bad outcomes that have been expressed on both sides. And that's why we have 40% of youth experiencing homelessness that identify as LGBTQ. And when they're not kicked out, there are many, many instances where they're simply abused, as we heard from some of the folks testifying. And I'm just trying to figure out how this bill, because I think what I'm hearing is the goal of this bill is to prevent homelessness and prevent abuse, how this bill would protect those students in those situations.
Delegate LaRock?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
You have the floor.
Thank you. I am not aware of any data to support that. We certainly have heard testimony, and that is, have no reason to question that. But I will, if I may, take you back, Delegate, to the committee that we both sat on, I think, early last week. We heard very compelling testimony from two parents who had a very difficult time conveying their testimony, because what they were talking about is a child that was with us no longer, a child who'd been the victim of bullying. This is another traumatic situation for a child to be in, challenges them at that young age. And the ask there, and it was voted on unanimously, and I think in full committee as well, unanimously, to require 24-hour notification of parents if a child is being bullied or has been reported that. Why would we treat this situation so differently? This is not a pro-trans, anti-trans. Absolutely nothing in the bill means to make any determination on whether it's right or it's wrong. But it does assume that in all situations, parents should be involved. It may not be a perfect situation that we create, but parents will be the best advocate and supporter of that child in overwhelming number of situations. So that's the goal and what we would like to see as the outcome.
Delegate,
Mr.
to answer
Chair.
your question?
Follow-up question.
Yes, sir. You have the
I'll
floor.
answer your question in a second in my comments. But I wanted to talk about another part of this bill, which is the criteria. How do we come up with the criteria used to decide when a child identifies other than their sex assigned at birth? And the reason I bring that up is because I think the Board of Education and VDOE would be, I guess, making up those criteria. But, you know, for instance, what if you do you have to call a student's parents if they, use a nickname of the different gender, for instance? Like, what is the trigger point? How do we even come up with that?
Perhaps if you could reference a specific line in the bill, I would be more than glad to try to answer you specifically. But if you're questioning the way the bill is written, I didn't see any what I would consider to be ambiguous or difficult language in defining what constitutes the basis for notification. If a child identifies as transgender or identifies those inclinations, that's to be reported. So if I'm missing your question, please help me.
Mr. Chair, follow up. Yeah, just trying to help kind of fine tune the question. So you mentioned inclinations. What does that mean? What is the intent? Like, what is the meaning of inclinations? I guess that's what I'm trying to get at. That was the word you used.
Well, again, if the delegate would identify a question based on the wording of the bill, if I may have paraphrased it in a way that was less clear, I'd be glad to reference the specific text of the bill.
Mr. Chair.
You have the floor, Delegate.
It's not the specific text of the bill that's the issue. It's that there has to be a trigger point by which the school is then required to notify the parent, correct? So there's a point, a threshold in which we have to notify the parent that there's inclinations, as you put it, that the student that the parent of the student needs to be notified that the student is that the parents need to be notified, right, based on everything that's in this bill. So I'm just wondering what is the threshold by which we determine when the parents have to be notified? Do you understand what I'm trying to ask?
I do, Mr. Chairman, and I'm not trying to evade the question. I think it's pretty specifically called out, and I probably should ask the chairman, if I may, introduce the line amendment, because I want, before I point to
You
line.
have the floor. When we vote, we will put into an amendment. You're correct. Go ahead, Delegate
Okay,
LaRock.
so I'll do my best to address as it would be amended if the committee were to accept what I think is a simple line amendment. Line 18, we would amend, we would insert the phrase after or, in the case of a minor, which I don't think really changes line 18, but the threshold is, comma, or that such student is self-identifying as a gender different from the student's biological sex. So if that doesn't answer your question, I don't think I can. That's the threshold.
Does that answer your question, sir?
I'll speak to the bill at the appropriate time.
Okay. Anyone else wishing to speak? Let's move on the amendment first. What's your pleasure, please? Sure. Mr. Counsel, could you please read off the amendment?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It would be on line 18, after the word or, insert comma in the case of a minor, so that it would read or comma in the case of a minor comma that such student is self-identifying as a gender different from the student's biological sex.
And Mr. Chairman, I think that was triggered by the Attorney General just wanting to make it clear that we were referring to a minor and nothing
Your
more.
motion, move the amendment. Second. All in favor, say aye. Opposed? Delegate Subramaniam, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank everyone who came here to testify. I'll just say that the intentions, if the intentions here are to prevent bullying, prevent abuse and homelessness of LGBTQ kids, and even if the intention is more parental notification, this does the opposite, in my opinion, because what's happening in real life examples, many of which I know, is that kids are being kicked out of their homes, they're being abused, and because the situation was not handled properly, and what's going to happen is kids are not going to want to say or do anything that could tip off the school counselors who they're supposed to trust, the teachers, and so parents will know even less about their kids. They'll have even less notification, less insight into their lives, because they'll be afraid, and they'll be living in fear. And there's been so many situations where these kids, the question was, we had the bill last week about bullying. I was a co-patron of that bill. I want parents to know when their kids are being bullied in school so that they can help fix bullying. But this is not bullying. This is about someone's personal decision to whether to identify and how to identify when it comes to gender. And this is completely different. And there's a lot of logical leaps that are being made between being LGBTQ and sex trafficking, and being LGBTQ and so many other things. This bill is, I think, could be potentially dangerous to a lot of kids, and I hope we vote no. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Delegate Maldonado, you have the floor, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Speaking to the bill.
You have the floor.
For all the reasons just shared by Delegate Subramanian, I agree and associate myself with. But there is also another subtext here that concerns me, and that is, while I also appreciate, and my heart breaks as a mother, for the parents whose children, grandchildren, nieces, nephews are experiencing some of these traumas, I don't think the bill directly addresses that. I agree there is a huge leap between providing a safe space where a child can go to speak to someone in their school to that then leaping to sex trafficking or leaping to other things. There's so much that goes in between. The other subcomponent that concerns me is that if we really do care about addressing these mental health issues, whether it's this bill or the bill coming up in 1701, it's interesting to me that we are associating and assuming that gender identity issues are tied to mental health, like a mental illness. The subtext here is by putting it in these two provisions that there is an association of mental illness with transgender identities. There are many other things that associate with suicide ideation and suicide in our schools. Think about the enormous crisis percentage of children in our schools that are dealing with eating disorders. That's not here. These are things that aren't directly tied, and I look at this and really feel it's a subtle way to target out our trans youth. And it is not a way to protect parents' rights like mine. What I want is for my child to be safe. What we all want is for our child to be able to have a safe place to go, and for us as parents to be able to come into that conversation. I do not believe that that bill does this, despite the real crisis that is underneath and the intention that it is trying to reach in this bill. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, ma'am. Chair recognizes Delegate Durant.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think that, first, just adding to the recent comment that there's not a direct relationship between those who are who are identifying with as a gender other than their biological sex with gender dysphoria. That is actually included in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, and that's a manual published by the American Psychiatric Association. We heard some just heartbreaking testimony. We've certainly heard it outside this committee as well about horrific situations where students have had real abuse and neglect and in just heartbreaking situations. But at the end of the day, this does not rise to the level where we are no longer allowing any parents to be notified of what's happening in their children's lives. Parents should never be the last to know, no matter what this outcome is. And it's a very strange place to me that we're in now, where parents are being told to step aside, to sit down, that we are, as educators, as counselors, know better than your own child. And that's just simply not true. It is not the case. The parents love their children. I am a parent of 3, and because there are parents out there who have not responded appropriately in an abusive situation, it does not trump my right to know exactly what's happening with my children. So I hope it's the will of this committee to support this bill.
Other discussion? Delegate LaRocque, briefly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You've been very generous with the time. This is not an us versus them bill. I got to read very briefly emails that would support that. I'm a longstanding member of Amnesty International, a mother of 3, born transgender and confirmed female at 2.5 years of age by my parents' decision. My pronouns are she, her, and I've redacted the name. As a human rights activist and United States citizen, as a member of the trans community, and a parent, I wish you much success. Peace be with you as you work on this bill. Another parent, as a parent of a teenager who identifies as transgender, I want to thank you for introducing Sage's Law. Our family has been living a nightmare for more than 4 years, trying to keep our daughters safe while maintaining a good relationship with her and attempting to give her time to mature and become comfortable in her body. We have all read the stories about parents losing their kids to Child Protective Services, glittering families, and traffickers. We wholeheartedly support your bill. We want to protect children. I believe that everyone in this room would agree with that, and that this bill will put parents in the room making the decisions and close the door on the predators who would prey on these children. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Members, the committee operates on motions. What is your pleasure, please? A motion to report. Is there a second? With amendment. Move to report with amendment. Is there a second? Do I have a second? I have a second. Okay. Let's vote and see what the motion shall pass, please. Motion to report passes 4-3.
LaRocque
Thank you,
votes
Delegate
yes.
LaRocque.
Mr. Chairman, sorry to be slow
Yes,
on
sir.
that. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, members, we have